you so much, Nutanix, today for hosting us in the session. I'm very excited, and I'm really looking forward to what you have to present today. Before I hand over to the first speaker, who's Martin Walshaw, a few house rules. Please remember to engage with us in the public chat window. Should you not hear anything, should you not be able to see the presentation, this is just for those who are joining us for the first time. So please remember to engage with us in the public chat window. Don't forget to use the Q&A window for your question and answers. We do have a few polls that we're running. So please look out for the polls so that you're able to answer them and we can get some feedback from you. And then finally, we have handouts that will be published for you to download. So please remember to download the handouts because those are very important for you for follow-up purposes. This session ideally is supposed to run for 1 hour, but depending on how much you engage us, we will just go a little bit over an hour. So I ask you to bear with us because it will be worth your while. And finally, I would like to introduce Martin Walshaw. Martin is the one who's going to speak us through the content that Nutanix has today around the Hyper-Convergence. And then after that, we will be joined by Rui for the Q&A session. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, on behalf of CIO East Africa, thank you so much for joining us. And we do look forward to having an exciting and interesting session. Martin, the floor is yours.
My name is Martin Walshaw, as mentioned. I am the Strategic Account Manager for East Africa at Nutanix. And over the next sort of half an hour, I'd just like to take you through the difference or what hyperconvergence can provide you that traditional legacy infrastructure can't. Now, like every vendors, we have disclaimers, etc., etc. I'm not going to give you 20 minutes to read through it, but basically everything that I'm going to be giving you is basically public information. So looking at the agenda that we're going to be going through today, to start off with, what I'd really like to do is to set the scene. And the way that I like to look at things is to make it more personal. So as you look through the next 5 or 6 slides that I'm going to be presenting, you'll see that it is extremely relevant both to myself, Martin, as well as to each and every person out there that either A, has an infrastructure that they're looking after, or B, has something that they use at home. And then what I'm going to be doing is talking through the different advantages and the way that we can make life simpler and easier as an IT organization to ensure that as you need to scale and as you need to change and as you need to grow, it is as seamless as possible. So to start things off, the easiest way for me to look at things is that trying to do things in the new environment that we are in the new business environment we are in, and taking old technologies and trying to utilize them just does not work. You look at those 2 cars there, the Pontiac down the bottom, 20, 30, actually a lie, 40 years ago, was one of the most sought after cars that you could get worldwide. It had all the features, all the functionality, but the problem is that they didn't grow with the times, they didn't change, they didn't adapt, they didn't move with technology. So looking at the car at the top, the Tesla, everybody's talking about Tesla at the moment because what they've done is they've revolutionized what cars can and cannot do. They've taken something that was a traditional standard model, because at the end of the day, a car gets you from point A to point B. That is its goal. But they've simplified it. You don't have to worry about filling it up. You don't have to worry about parking. They've taken all of those choices out there and they've simplified it all for you. So while the top and the bottom pictures are exactly the same, basically, they are extremely different in what they do. And as another example of that is if you look at the differences between taxis and Uber. You know, with a taxi, you had to stand around, you had to wait, and hopefully as one came past you, you were able to climb in it. But it may have been full, there may be no taxis. You could end up standing on the corner of the road for a while. You may have to move around. With Uber, they've taken exactly that same technology and they've simplified it so that when you make a request, you don't have to move. You know for a fact that the car is going to be there within X amount of time. You know for a fact that you're going to get a car, and you know upfront what your costs are going to be. So while they're doing the ride share, the way that they are doing it is the same but completely different. And that is what the focus is going to be about over the next few slides that I'm going to be doing. So when we look at technology in general, hopefully you can read some of that slide there. I'm looking at it at the moment, and I can read it, but it's very, very, very small for me. But this is what happens in an internet minute. If you look at that, that is in 2012, so 8 years ago. You look at some of those companies that you'll see there, such as Flickr and a couple of the other ones, they're no longer around. Why? Because they didn't adapt. They didn't change. They didn't go forward with technology. They just tried to rest on their laurels and use the technology that they had. And with the speed of change of technology, you want to make sure that this is the direction that you're going in. So just a couple of points over there. I'm going to give you a couple of comparisons in a moment. YouTube will be one of them. But if you look at my next slide, before I go to my next slide, you look down the bottom on the left-hand side, it talks about by the year 2015, we will have double the amount of devices than there are people connected to the internet. Now, this was done in 2012, so 3 years later, they were expecting the amount of devices to have doubled the amount of people, so 14 billion essentially. But if you look at it, Gartner says that they have around 21 billion connected devices already. Now, this, forgive the pictures, but this is some of the stuff that I own, from a connected toothbrush to multiple connected watches to some silly things that I bought that are connected to the internet. But the point is, if you have a look at the number of devices that I personally have connected to my network today, I have around 55 devices. So whether it be my kids running their PS4s, tablets, computers, smartwatches, my sprinkler system is IP enabled, whether it be my lights, whether it be the Amazon Echo. I don't want to say the word, otherwise it's going to light up. But the point is that I've had at home to create an infrastructure that is going to support all of these devices. So if there are 4 of me, myself, my wife, and my 2 kids at home, and we have over 50 devices in our network today at home, the question is, what are you going to have in your infrastructure today? Not only what are you going to have today, but the question is, what are you going to have to cater for? How many devices, how much data are you going to have to put in place? A simple example, and once again, I did mention that it is going to be personal examples, is if you look at PlayStation or Xbox, when you download a game, it's 50 gig. It's no longer small little things. So now, if kids can consume hundreds of gigs per day, the question is, what are the users on the infrastructure going to do? What are your consumers going to do? And how are you going to cater for this growth in data? And just to bring it up to date, the previous slide that I showed, or 2 slides back, was in 2012. If you have a look at it today, you'll see that this is completely different to what it was 8 years ago. So a lot of these companies have had to adapt, have had to change. As an example, YouTube, we're talking about 40 videos being uploaded every minute, 40 hours of video being uploaded every minute. We're now up to a number of around 500 hours. You look at something like Netflix, who are streaming 405,000 hours every minute. You look at something like WhatsApp, doing close to 42 million messages per minute. they've had to adapt, they've had to change, they've had to create an infrastructure to be able to support the business. And just because you're in that business doesn't necessarily mean that that is what you need to buy. You look at the examples on the right-hand side, whether it be Amazon or Uber not owning any cars, or Netflix not being a TV channel. The point is that everything has changed, and the way that you need to look at your infrastructure is to not take what was available, but to look at how you are going to adapt and how you're going to change from a technology perspective. And the last slide just around this is looking at Amazon as a case in point. Once again, you look at the beginning, the first slide that I showed from 2012, they were doing around $15 to $20 billion per quarter in revenue. But now they're doing between 70 and 90 billion of revenue every single quarter. The question is, how have they been able to adapt? How have they been able to grow? And how have they been able to change their business to be able to cater for the changes in the buying requirements of the consumers? And if you look at the technology that they are using, that is one of the enablers that has set them apart from everybody else. So as Amazon grows, you'll see that their infrastructure, their capabilities will be able to cater for that future growth. So just a couple of scene setting points, telling you that basically what you have today may well be old technology, but what you really need to be looking at is, where do I need to go? What should I be doing? And your legacy infrastructure cannot provide you with that speed of change that is happening in the network today, or as with businesses today. So I have a few polls that are scattered throughout the presentation. So please do me a favor and click on the polls button. I'd like to just ask a couple of simple questions. The first one being, do you have a simple and easy way to be able to grow your infrastructure on demand? So if all of a sudden you bought another company, or all of a sudden you had to change the business model that you are running, if all of a sudden we had to add another 10 databases, do you have that capability to be able to grow and change your infrastructure as your needs and your requirements change? I'm hoping that the answers are yes, because that is what you need to do. But will you be surprised how many answers are no, or I don't think so? So please do me a favor, answer that poll while I carry on with the rest of my presentation. So just to give you an idea of where we're starting from, what exactly is hyperconvergence? So most of the time what we have today is a solution whereby once, about 20 years ago, VMware or hypervisors came into play. And basically what happened was it revolutionized the ability to be able to make more efficient usage of the servers that you had available. It was a great concept. It was a great tool to be able to be more efficient, to spend more money, but to be able to create more usage out of your existing infrastructure. The challenges that you have is that it did scale. And what we talk about is, if you look at the top half of the picture versus the bottom half of the picture, the top half of the picture where you have the hypervisor is scaling out. So as we add more applications or we add more services, we're able to scale out that compute. But what happens is, down the bottom, you still have your storage. And most of the time, you have to scale up your storage. And the reason for that is we are consuming more and more data as time goes on. We are using more and more data as time goes on. So you have the scale out and you have the scale up. The problem that you have in general with your legacy infrastructure is the fact that it is segmented. There are multiple different areas, there are multiple different vendors, there are multiple different solutions, there are multiple different pieces of software, there are multiple different pieces of management that need to be put in place to be able to manage, to be able to upgrade, and to be able to utilize the solution. Not only that, but in most cases, the top half, where you see the hypervisor and the server, has no concept about what is happening down the bottom below C1 and C2 in the storage area network. So what we've done is we've changed the way that we do things. We've allowed users to be able to scale. We've allowed users to be able to bring their storage pool, and for you to be able to have one single management console that manages your compute, it manages your server, it manages your storage. Not only that, but it scales without limits. It means that whether it be 2 nodes, 3 nodes, 10 nodes, or our biggest single cluster is 2,000 nodes, the same solution that we would put in place for the smallest would be the same solution that we would put in place for the biggest customer. Not only that, but because of this flexibility, besides allowing you to be able to scale, it also allowed you to mix and match. One of the biggest challenges that you've had in the past, specifically around storage, is the fact that if you put something in place, vendor one with solution one, you have to carry on doing that. Different hardware generations, different types of solutions, they're just not compatible with each other. From a hyper-converged standpoint, this all falls away. Almost everything is compatible with each other. So whether it be different hardware generations, so Skylake versus the Skylake refresh, whether it be SSD versus spinning disk versus NVMe, all of these solutions are now able to interwork together, getting rid of the need for a SAN and getting rid of the need for multiple different management consoles. Not only that, but there are other features and functionality that we can include as part of that to make sure that you're making the most out of your storage pool, the most out of your hypervisor, and the most out of your compute that is available out there. So it's about simplification. It's about getting rid of the old technologies in your infrastructure and looking at how we can integrate them from a hyper-converged perspective. So a next question from a poll standpoint is, we have multiple different types of infrastructure that we look at. Starting from many moons ago, we have individual servers, standalone servers, which some customers still run today with no virtualization. We have the 3-tier architecture, as I've shown it in the previous slide with virtualization, where you have separate storage, you have separate fiber channel controllers, you have separate compute, you have separate virtualization. Or you have everything that is brought together from a hyper-converged standpoint. Or if you're not sure, please just click not sure. But the point is that there are multiple different architectures that you need to look at. And migrating from the one to the other is actually not that difficult. So looking at, besides the simplicity that we can put on the solution, the question is, how do we look at deployment? Now, from an old traditional legacy perspective, you have multiple different areas to look at. Starting from the top, you have a hypervisor with some sort of management as part of that solution. As we go down the stack, you'll have your servers and your host bus adapters, your HBAs, along with some type of management. You'll then have some type of fiber channel switching in the middle that is connecting to the storage controllers, and the storage controllers will connect to the disk shelves. Now, all of those will generally have multiple different management consoles that we look at. The other thing to think about from that standpoint is the fact that it is also very difficult to be able to upgrade. Okay, how do we make sure that we deploy it, we can configure it, and we can troubleshoot it if there's any problems? if you have a problem in your legacy environment, it is difficult to be able to pinpoint exactly where that solution, exactly where that problem would be. Whereas if you look at Nutanix, Nutanix gets rid of all of that. We have a simple, easy to use management console, which we call Prism Pro, that allows us to be able to do all of the configuration on every single hardware platform that we have, that allows us to be able to manage it and install it in a very, very, very short period of time. Not only that, but as you can see, it is a single installer for all your deployments, and manage it across multiple clusters. And I'll talk about some of the clusters a little bit later, across sites, whether it be your disaster recovery, whether it be your remote branches. And we can deploy to multiple different hypervisors if you want. So it is not a problem there whatsoever. And the best thing about it is we can even deploy remote sites centrally. So no longer do you have to send people out to the remote branches to be able to go do the configuration from that standpoint. And as I mentioned, the solution itself is easy to be able to deploy. It allows you to be able to streamline any type of large or small deployment, having one centralized management solution. And the great thing about it is, without having to send anybody out to do the installation or the configuration, means that you can have staff that are centrally located that are able to do the configuration, the management, and the support. As an example, we have a bank that has branches in 10 different countries, and they manage everything from one single country. So they're not worried about the remote countries. They have a hardware maintenance contract in place. So if an SSD or some piece of hardware fails or something like that, then they just get a rip and replace. But from the software perspective, everything is managed centrally, which makes life so much easier. So one of the previous sessions I did, we talked about the invisible infrastructure. This is where this invisible infrastructure comes in, just having one management console to be able to manage absolutely everything. And there are other features and functionality as well that we can talk about for sure. So the challenge that we have today, and this is my next poll question, is that once you end up deploying, in most cases, a specific brand or a specific type of server, what happens is you end up with a whole host of locking. So it's not just about the servers, but what would be good to know from your perspective is, what type of servers do you use? From a Nutanix standpoint, we support all of the servers that are listed there and others at the same time. But just to get an understanding of the type of servers or the brand of servers that you put in place. At the end of the day, our CEO published an article around why servers are irrelevant or why hardware is irrelevant. And basically what he's saying is the fact that realistically, if you have a 1.92 terabyte SSD, or you have 64 gig of RAM, or you have a 6258 processor and 12 bays, the question is, what is the difference between the vendors? And realistically, the difference between the vendors is going to be the support that you get and possibly something like failure rates. So it's not actually about the hardware, because that has been pretty much commoditized these days. It's more about the support that you get. And Nutanix has realized that and supports all of the vendors, the hardware vendors that we mentioned a little bit earlier. So the question is, we've put a solution in place. We have done it centrally. We are at the moment managing everything from one place. But how do we scale it? I mean, what do we need to do to be able to scale it? The challenge that you have today with existing legacy infrastructure is there's this concept of IOPS, and it's around performance. But if you look at the example, you have two servers over there, each providing 100,000 IOPS, and you have a NAS or a SAN that gives you the ability to be able to run up to 200,000 IOPS. Today, that performance is great because whatever is coming in is able to be serviced and what have you. The question is, how do we scale that? So we have to add some more features, some more functionality. We need to add more users. How do we go about doing that? Because we, based on the existing diagram, we're pretty much close to our maximum performance. So what we do is we go and we buy a server and we add that to the existing cluster. But the problem is we've now gone from 100,000 IOPS to 66,000 IOPS each. So we're adding more, but the performance is still not good. So we think, okay, great. We need to do something around this. So let us add another server in, virtualize it, run the VMs on there. But the problem is, as we go through, we keep on buying more servers, but we're not getting the performance. And the reason being is the fact that no matter how many servers that you buy on the top end, because the top piece is decoupled from the bottom, as I mentioned, scale out and scale up. You can add more servers and it will not make a difference to the storage down the bottom. So what do? You sit there and you add more disks. But the problem is that you still sit with the same problem because the storage controllers have not scaled with the servers. Even adding the capacity, because the storage controllers don't support it, does not change the issue. So what's happening is essentially you're throwing money away when it comes to legacy infrastructure. The way to do that is to rip and replace it, to upgrade the entire NAS or SAN solution. Whereas from a Nutanix perspective, and unfortunately this I'm using PDF here, so it doesn't animate. But the point is, from a Nutanix perspective, it is easy to be able to add. We can add a compute-heavy node if we need computing power. We can add a storage-heavy node if we need more storage than compute. We can add a storage-only node if need be. If we need to have performance, we can add something with a high CPU and an all-flash system that allows us to be able to both increase the compute, the capacity, as well as the IOPS as well. Not just that, we can mix and match. So you can actually add in a piece that is specific to you. So you need a storage heavy solution to be able to cater for it. You literally buy a storage heavy node, you plug it in, within an hour it is up and running. Very, very, very little intervention that is needed. So from that perspective, we're able to pick up and automatically add the capabilities into the existing cluster. So to add storage, to add to clusters is extremely, extremely easy. I have a customer today that is actually, they're a Nutanix customer. They've been running us for about a year or so. And they have now just decided that they're going to replace their entire NAS and they're going to replace it with Nutanix. And all that they're doing is that they're just adding 2 storage heavy nodes to their existing infrastructure to be able to cater for that solution. Not only that, they're actually migrating all the workloads away from their old NAS onto the Nutanix solution. Extremely easy to be able to do and extremely fast to move everything across. So we have that flexibility to be able to add on demand and to be able to mix and match nodes as need be. What do we do around failures? Everybody thinks that by having a 3-tier architecture, a legacy infrastructure, that it gives you more flexibility when it comes to failures. And that is not the case. Unfortunately, once again, this is an animation, so it doesn't show it very nicely. But the point of the matter is, for us, if we have one failure, in this particular example, it's 5 nodes. But if we have one failure within that cluster, because we keep multiple copies of that data, we can literally switch off one of those nodes with 0 interruption to that existing cluster that is out there. The data is automatically moved. The data is automatically backed up as well. Multiple copies of that data, even though the original one is down, we're able to make sure that there are multiple copies. And it is much, 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 much faster than RAID. You will never see a Nutanix person talking about RAID 5, RAID 6, blah, blah, blah. Never. It is, once again, one of those pieces of legacy history that now needs to be forgotten. We need to start looking forward and figuring out, whether it be RF2, RF3, etc., how we do the failures. And at the same time, if we had another node in the cluster fail as well, somebody switches that node off, it would be exactly the same situation. Because we've got multiple copies of those data, we can have two of those nodes go without affecting any type of data out there. Now, obviously, we have to design it to be able to make sure that that's possible. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of customers have this type of solution in place. In fact, all of our customers have a minimum of 3 nodes to be able to cater for those types of failures. And whether it be 3 nodes, whether it be 5 nodes, or whether it be 2,000 nodes, the point is that scalability is there, that allows you to be able to cater for any type of hardware failure within the cluster. And looking at it, I mean, we're able to not just worry about failures, but we've also got one, as I mentioned, simple, easy management console that allows you to be able to do integrated disaster recovery between your primary and your DR, to automate the failover, to be able to test it, to be able to fail over and fail back, to be able to set up recovery plans. If we want to fail over from here to here, we want to test it. We have those capabilities built into the Nutanix solution. And if you want to do backups, we have multiple vendors that we work with today. In fact, we have a solution with both Haiku and with Veeam that we work on today that comes directly from Nutanix and is bundled as part of what we call our Nutanix Mind solution, allowing you to be able to do one-click data protection and archive from our perspective. The thing is that whether it is worrying about looking at your hypervisor, whether it is looking at your underlying servers, whether it's looking at your storage, your compute, whether it is looking at your backup, whether it is looking at your virtualization, you have that one single pane of glass management that allows you to be able to do your backup, to be able to do your recovery, to be able to do your virtualization, etc. And from that standpoint, I have a very big tendency to harp on about our management because it is just so easy to be able to use. But you look at it today in a lot of networks today, or network infrastructures today, you will have multiple, maybe as many as 15 different management consoles that you use to be able to configure the servers, the storage, the backups, the virtualization, etc., etc., etc. From a Nutanix perspective, we have one. That is it. We have Prism that is able to do many, many, many things. 2 things I just want to quickly mention to you that you will be able to see on the screen there. The first one is the fact that if you look on the top left-hand side, you'll see that it says demo-ESXi. This is a Nutanix platform that is running ESX as the hypervisor, and because we support multiple different hypervisors. But whether you are running ESXi, whether you're running Hyper-V, whether you're running Zen Server, or whether you are running Nutanix's license-free hypervisor, so zero-cost hypervisor, the look, the feel of the management console would be exactly the same. That is the first point I'd like to mention about the management console. The second part is, if you look at the third column, you'll see that it mentions XC, HX, Dell EMC, there's Lenovo clusters in there. The point is that regardless of the underlying hardware, regardless of the hardware vendor, the look and feel of our management console is exactly the same. So you're not going to have to learn one console if you are running Lenovo and another console if you are running HPE and another console if you are running Fujitsu. You have one console, one pane of glass, regardless of the underlying hardware, number one, and the same single pane of glass management, regardless of the hypervisor that you are running. And I will talk about it in one or two slides, regardless of the cloud that you are running it on. So whether it be on-premise, whether it be on Azure, whether it be on AWS, the same single pane of glass management console that gives you everything in one box. So I'm extremely proud of Prism. I think it is a phenomenally easy tool to be able to use, regardless of the underlying infrastructure. And it allows us to be able to do something called one-click upgrades, non-disruptive upgrades. So we can upgrade the hardware, we can upgrade the whether it be the BIOS, the BMC, the hard drives, the SSD versions, etc., from all of those vendors and others listed below. We can upgrade the Nutanix software that is sitting on top of it. All of it with what we call one-click upgrades. So literally, you press the button, you click the mouse, and the infrastructure is upgraded non-disruptively. So it removes all the complexity about having to worry about whether or not this version works with that version, works with this hardware, works with that software. All of that is taken care of regardless of the vendor. And it is unbelievably scalable. We can do rolling upgrades. We can make sure that the infrastructure is all running the same version with very little to no human intervention, making sure that you are able to focus on things other than just having to upgrade your infrastructure. And also, as a second to last point, is looking at the scalability, is you want to be able to make sure that you have the right solution in place for you. Nothing worse than buying infrastructure that you cannot use or that you're not using. Nothing worse than buying for 5 years and you only need it in 3 years' time, and you realize that all of a sudden the processes that you bought are outdated. The storage you could have bought double. So with something called Nutanix Runway as part of our management console, it's once again integrated as part of our management console, we are able to look at the resources that are being utilized and determine with a high degree of accuracy how long you have left with those existing resources. So it gives you as-is view of what is happening on your network. So how long will your storage last? How long will your compute last, etc. And it also gives you a what if. So what if we had to add another 5 databases? What if we look at the previous example that I mentioned, we had to add a whole host of users? How would that impact what we have today? And if it does impact it and we do not have enough resources available, what do we need to buy to be able to make sure that we do have those resources? So all of those are available as part of the solution. And the second last thing to mention is around workloads. If you look at the legacy infrastructure, most cases you're actually building silos depending on what those applications need to run. Whether it be from having something in the cloud and having a separate something for AWS, whether it be having a separate type of solution for your branch offices, whether if you look at the right-hand side, having something performance related and trying to separate everything by having an all-flash array. The point is that from a legacy environment, you will generally have those silos that you will be running and using. From a Nutanix perspective, we can run any workload, anywhere, any size, anyhow, regardless of whether it is a database, whether it's big data, whether we have to run it on-premise or in the cloud, whether we have to move it from on-premise and into the cloud. All of those capabilities are done from one single cluster, and it scales as the organization or as your organization will grow. And the last thing just to mention is looking at the insights that you have available. Looking at the insights that we have available, making sure that you are able to access other things as well, whether it be via iSCSI to something external, whether it be connecting to other file services via NFS or SMB, or connecting to the cloud via some type of S3. We still have that single pane of glass management, regardless of where your data is actually located. And whether you are looking at a cloud that is on-premise, or whether you're looking at a cloud in AWS or Azure, but once again, that same single management platform allows you to be able to have the same policies, the same rules, and be able to move from on-premise and move a workload into the cloud and back again. We have native integration already into AWS and Azure, with more on the way. But it also means that because of that, and the fact that you have that single management console, there is no lock-in if you choose to use cloud as a service. The point is, regardless of where you want your data to sit, regardless of where you want your application to sit, Nutanix will be able to support it from that single pane of glass management console. And as a last slide, just to mention, if you look at my first couple of slides, I was talking about cars. You do not buy a car, in most cases, without test driving it. You want to make sure that it is a fit for you. You want to make sure that it can, if you have small kids, you can fit the pram in the back of the car. You want to make sure that if you're an IT guy, that you can fit all your rubbish in the back of the car. You have to go and you have to test drive it and make sure it's the right solution for you, or the right car for you. And I feel exactly the same when it comes to technology. While I know for a fact that Nutanix is correct for in excess of 95% of customers out there, the point is the proof is in the pudding. So please do me a favor, have a look at the link. Have a look at the link that I've got there. It allows you to be able to test drive the Nutanix technology. It takes you through what you can and can't do, how easy it is to be able to create, how easy it is to be able to grow and contract, how easy it is to be able to deploy, how easy it is to be able to upgrade, and a whole host of other things as well. So please, please, please use that link. It is one of the things that just helps us to show how easy it is to be able to deploy. And as a last point, if you look at guys like Uber, guys like Netflix, guys like Amazon, guys like Airbnb, one of the reasons why they have been so successful is because they've made life simple. Okay, that is the underlying technology, or the underlying goal of their technology is to make life simple. Nutanix is exactly the same. We're there about making everything invisible, making everything easy, and making sure that you can focus on the important things that need to be done rather than the day-to-day mundane things that need to be done. So as a very, very, very last slide, does your team have any plans to change or your existing infrastructure and moving from your existing 3-tier to a hyper-converge, or are you having challenges around storage, or is a storage refresh somewhere happening along the way? Please do me a favor, answer the question. It helps us to understand the where you are in your cycles. However, what I want to see is almost everybody say yes within 6 months, because at the end of the day, this technology is there to be used, and it does make your life easier. So with that, that is my last slide. I'd like to say thank you. As per usual, I was asked how long I was going to be. I said 25 minutes, and I think I've been almost 40 minutes. So with that, I'm going to keep quiet and let everybody else take over.
Thank you very much for that fantastic presentation. I think we've learned quite a bit about what hyperconvergence can do that legacy infrastructure can't. It is pretty obvious that we need to move away from legacy infrastructure in order to survive today from a technology perspective. And for me, one of the coolest things that you've talked about today is the test drive. I think, as you said, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The proof of the pie is in the eating. Let's all go use that link, download, test drive before we make a decision. There's nothing as good as test driving and making a decision based on something that you have